just to give you a little brief of my history, or how these things become here. I do have a portable chainsaw mill, and I cut all my own wood. And I use all different kinds of wood as long as it's light colored. Most of these are hard maple. I use also birch and beech, soft maple. Poplar is one I have a lot of because they're an easy tree to get. And so that's one thing. And another thing is I started making my own wood burning tips. Some of you have come up and looked at them, and I've talked to some of you. If there's others that are interested, we'll go through that afterwards if you'd like. I'll be here. I want to start out tonight, mainly I'm going to talk about shading. You look at these and you wonder how you're going to, what are you talking about shading on something like this? This is the first time that I go over an animal. You get the outlines and you get the direction that the fur is going in. That's all I do, so that I'm not confused when I'm trying to get the animal done. That's how that is. On this side is just the pattern that I traced on here. And all you trace on here is just the outline, just short little lines, not a solid line, just short little lines for the outline of the animal. Okay? After you do it the second time, where you start putting the hair on, you go through it and you make it like that. Some people think that that's far enough. But the problem with one like this is there's a lot of white in here, and it's light colored, and if it sits out in the light and sunshine, it will fade to a degree. So I go over to another time and I get it to look like that. Then I go over it the last time and make it look like that. That's on the top here. By doing it 3, 4, 5 times sometimes, what I find is I can get the depth, and I get it to look where a lot of people will want to touch it, and then they'll say it looks like real hair. By only going over it once or twice, I can't get that depth, and I can't get the detail. When it comes to detail, what I would like to have you look at, when you can come up closer, is here on this horse. I have these two as contrasts. This one I just finished. This looks like white, but when you come up here and look, you'll see there's all lines in there. That it looks like hair. Here you can see a dark line here. You can see a dark line here. This is from here back, that's the rump of the horse. From this line to this line is the belly, and then here is the front shoulders. And then you can see where the mouth is. Now those are not solid lines. Those are all little individual short lines, the direction that the hair is going. Because the horse doesn't have solid lines on it. It's the same way when you make the pattern like I just showed up here. You make the pattern, you make little short lines all the way around. Okay? Now, for a contrast, I burned a little hair on here, and then I took my shader and I shaded it. And I shaded it dark. And you can't see the hair on there unless you get real close and look. So it's a matter of how you like to have it look. If you like it like this, then you can shade it, and you don't really have to put any hair on. All you have to do is put the hair for the tail and the mane. So it's a matter of personal opinion, how you like to have it look. Here's another different aspect of shading. To get the difference in the rocks and the tree, you can see on the edges it's a little bit darker than in the middle, and that will give you a little three-dimensional look to it. Also on the birds, this looks from a distance like it's shaded, but it's not. There's all little lines in there. Where these wing feathers and the tail feathers are, you'll see the quill, and then you'll see all the little veins that are on the feathers. So it gives it like a shaded look, but what you're doing is you're shading with lines. The same way here with grass. In the foreground, you make the grass darker. Here in the background on the hillside, you make it lighter. This gives you your depth look. Through here, the river, I just shaded that lightly. This particular piece of wood was hard maple, and from this point to this point was the center of the wood, and it already was a little bit darker than what the other is. So I utilized that part and just made it a little bit darker, and that gives you the river effect. On the house, the contrast will give you the difference where the windows are, where your porch is, and your eaves and all that stuff. The whole secret of the whole thing is different shadings. You get a light, medium, and dark, and in between. And that gives you your depth and your appearance. I started making some of my own tips, but you can do probably 90% of your work with a boughten tip, which is called a skew. It looks like this. I probably do 90% of my work with this. When you want to do the hair, you make it like this. If you want to get into real short detail, you turn it upside down so that that point is there, and then you can get right into fine little points. And if you want to shade with it in narrow places, you turn it sidewise, and you just go like this, where the point is on one edge, and then you turn it around the other side, and you go on the other edge, and you can shade it. If you have narrow things like branches of trees, horse harness straps, like here's a wagon wheel, the metal rim that's on the old wooden wagon wheel, I shaded with this skew, but I turned it sidewise because I wanted a narrow area. You can also do it with what they call the shader, which is a point like this. It's on a 45 degree thing, and you can shade like this with it, or if you want to get to a point, you can hold it up like that, and you can point it that way. This will give you a wider path. When you have a long or wide area like this, then you use one of these. I've made a couple of different ones that I like. This one is square here on the end, so that instead of holding it and going sidewise, I can hold it like this and come back towards me, and I can, for me, it works better. And each individual has to kind of get their own develop their own techniques. I've read several different books on it, and each author has a different way of doing things, and they have a different type of wood that they like. Cheryl Dow, she likes basswood. It's a soft wood. Another fellow that I read, he uses sycamore. I myself like hard maple because it's a hard wood and I can get nicer detail on it. Where the softer wood, you got to go with a lighter heat on your burner, or else it flares out on you. I've done a log cabin house that a fellow built on a mountaintop, and in order to do the in between the logs, I made this tip here, and I filed it this way, and I filed it this way so that there's a thin part there. So if this is the logs on the log house, I made lines with a pencil to come where the logs were. Then I took this tip and I made it quite deep in there, or fairly deep in there, going along like this. Then I took this shader that I made, and where that flat part is, I started where that groove was and came up to the middle of the log, so that in where the groove is dark, this part of the log out here is light. So it gives you a three-dimensional look. Then you turn it around and you do the same on the other side of the log. And that will give you the 3D. By having it dark, medium, and light, that contrast is what makes the wood burning, gives it the three-dimensional look. With this tip like this that you can buy, only then you'd have to hold it on a side rather than going like this. You'd have to hold it on the side and come up. You can do the same thing with this. Is that a shader? This is the shader, with that 45-degree tip, that one that you bought. Yep. You can do that. I like to tinker with things, and so and this was easier for me to do, and I like it, and I also like it to doing well, shading like this. In fact, what I did is I also made one like this, but instead of flat, I just left it round, and then that's what I used on this river. I just have one that's round. I bent it and just left it round. I didn't flatten it out, and then it gave me a nice smooth thing. I didn't have, like with this tip, sometimes when you touch it down, it'll get dark, and then as you move, it goes light. But you have to control your speed. When you start out, you gotta have that tip moving before you touch the board, and then you gotta go very slow and steady, and you gotta look ahead and behind at the same time to see where you're going and how dark you're getting it, as to how fast you have to move. You just kind of, I don't know, you just have to look. You just have to practice. That's the whole thing, is practice, 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 and patience, patience, patience. It's nichrome wire. You can buy it on the internet. I don't have an internet, but a friend said he could get it on the internet, and he bought me. There's 3 different diameter thicknesses. There's a fine, medium, and coarse, and he bought me a 3-foot piece of each one, and then I use about a 2-inch piece, and then you silver solder it. That will withstand the heat. When you have a little tip like this, these mechanisms here you can buy at Radio Shack, and then you silver solder them on. What I use is a tip like this that somebody broke and was going to throw away, and I cut them off here, and then I silver soldered these connectors onto this post that sticks up here. And I've got more here. You want to see more? I've got real fine writing tips. I made fish scale tips, different shaders. I made what they call a spoon shader. That you can also buy. Some people in Florida where I teach the class, there's some people there that really like to use a spoon shader, but it just didn't come across to me. I don't care to use it, I guess. I put it that way. I like the other type better. One thing you can use with a spoon shader is you can make the leaves on for your trees. I don't have any here. I'll make here, these trees back here. You could use a spoon shader to make those leaves like that, or you could use the tip of this shader. Just use the tip of it and make different sizes, or you can use your writing tip and do the same thing. And with shrubbery that's around a building, I usually always use the writing tip for that, and I just make little dots and try to get various sizes and different shapes. I trace the outline of the house, and then all of the boards and all of the brick I would do with a ruler and a pencil first. And like on the brick, I would just make the horizontal lines, and I wouldn't make too many, and then I would burn them, and then I would make a few more, and then I would burn those, and then make a few more, so there wasn't so many, so it was confusing to me. And then later I would come through and I would make that first row of brick. The space is a part of how I wanted it, just free-handed. And then the next row of brick, of course, you go in the middle of that first row and just keep going on. In the same way with the shingles, you do the same thing with the shingles. You make the line across here. What I do when I make the old wooden shaker shingles is I'll make the pencil line straight across, but then when I burn on it, the first one I'll burn just below the line, the second one I'll burn just above the line, and I'll stagger it that way, and that way you'll get the shaker shingle look. And you got to make sure you make your lines on your shingles parallel to your roof line. You don't want them straight up and down. Like this horse, I probably have between 60 and 80 hours in it. Just making all of those lines. I don't keep track of my time, how many hours I spend in it, because I just enjoy doing it. And in the same way with this thing here, I probably got 80 to 100 hours in this piece right here. All of these trees are done free-handed. And bark on a trunk of a tree like this one, you can do various ways. You can make little lines that come up and down. This one here, I just shaded again. Where the edge, I had a straight line here along the edge, and then I took the shader and I come just a little ways up with the shader to give it the edge like that, so that it gives it a 3D look between the dark and the light. Well, I have a fluorescent light. That's why I only work maybe 20 on a detailed thing like this. I'll maybe only work 20 minutes to a half an hour. Then I have to rest my eyes. Also, when I get into the real fine detail stuff, I have a set of magnifying glasses that will fit right onto my glass here, and so I can see the thing better that way. Now, most of my wood I cut about 3/4 of an inch thick, and then you have to stack it with, I have approximately inch square sticks about every 20 inches. And then you stack it up so that the air can flow through. And it depends if you got where you store it. Where I stack mine is, my brother's has a hunting land up north, and he built like a pole building, and it's open on the one end, and then I cut slabs of lumber like this, and we put the lumber going up and down. Then we'd put one board there, we'd skip about 3 or 4 inches, then put the next board there, put the third board over top of those first two, and we sided the 3 sides of that building. It's I forget how big it is. You can put, it's like a 2-car garage, maybe a little longer than that. And then there's an opening up near the roof, because we didn't go right up tight up to the roof. We left it a little bit because the eave overhangs it, so air can flow through there and air can come in through the front. So if we have it in there for at least 1 year, sometimes I like to leave it in there 2 years if I get my wood a little too thick. The wood that's under 13 inches, I run through a planer, and when I burn on it, then I sand it again. And if it's wider than 13 inches, then I use a belt sander. I start out with about a 50-degree sandpaper and then go on down to finer degree paper. And with a chainsaw, when you're ripping a log with a chainsaw, you can't do it with your regular cross-cut chainsaw, which has a 35-degree cutter head on it. You have to have a 10-degree cutter head on that chain, and that will come out just like sawdust. By stacking it high enough, and then on the top piece, maybe put a little weight up there, that helps reduce the warping. You can paint the ends. That helps reduce the cracking on the ends. Usually on logs, if I want an 8-foot board, I will cut a log about 8 foot 6 to 9 inches long. That gives me 3 inches on each end that if it cracks, I can cut off and I'll still have an 8-foot board. The smoother you get the board, the easier it is for you to use your burning tools, because the smoother, that's another reason why I like hardwood, is because it's usually pretty uniform solid all the way through, and once you get your tip the temperature that you want, it's pretty consistent. The variance of that is how hot you control you have your burner. You have a burner that has a dial that you can control the temperature with. It depends on how hot you have that burner and how fast you move your tip. When I do something like shading this river, I'll have it fairly hot and I move my tip fairly fast. When I get into detail things like this siding, I turn my burner down so that I can go real slow. I can get my thing right up there like that and then just make that little mark. I made one mark. That took me that long to make one mark. You take your skew. Yep, you make a pencil line here for your siding, or if this is going up and down, you make your pencil line. You take your skew and you follow that pencil line. You put it right up there on the top and you come right on down slowly like that. Then you make your next one, you do the same thing, come right on down and you just come slowly with it. I tried to take my tip like this and bring my thumb and finger back like this. Then I stop, I move my hand, extend my thumb and finger, come back and make another movement like that. And if I want to go sidewise, turn my thing sidewise, get my hand like this, and I take that going along this way. I get that far, I move my hand so I'm comfortable so I can follow that line and go like this. If I got my hand out here, I'm liable to go like this with it. That's one thing with wood burning. I turn my board constantly so that I can see where I'm going and where I've been. And my hand is comfortable that I'm not going like this, trying to see where I'm going. I can just go like this and I can see what I'm doing. I've also built like a little easel, I guess you'd call it, that I can adjust the height. I can have it like this, or I can have it down this way, or I can have it up like this. And there's a little board that goes across the bottom of it, and I have 4 rows of holes in it, so I can have that board down here on the bottom. I can come up an inch, up to 4 inches. That gives me a place to rest my hand when I'm working on the bottom of the board, when I have it all up there ways. When I want to work on the top of the board, I can bring it down to that bottom hole so that I can I can see, I don't have to go like this to see what I'm doing. Those are just little things that I've developed myself. I didn't ever read those in a book. It's just something that, for me, it works. On the bottom of it, there's a little hole right here. There's a little screw down in there, and you can adjust the heat. I can turn that screw so that I can have this on 9, and my tip won't even get red. If you have, the burner you have, I think, is coal wood, and that doesn't have that function. So if you want to use yours, you have it down as low as it'll go. You've got to have a light touch. You've got to go and have your hand here and only go just a little ways and pick it up. Don't stop on the board. If you stop on the board, it's going to flare out, especially if you use soft wood. Basswood especially. If you use soft wood and you stop or you hesitate, or when you push it down and for just a second before you move it, it's going to flare out, because basswood and poplar is similar but not as soft as basswood. That's what's going to happen. So you have to move your tip. You cannot stop. You have to have that tip moving, and if you're going to stop, you've got to raise it up before you stop. Move your hand down and get it moving before you touch that board. Okay? That's the reason that's the reason I prefer hardwood over against softwood. Another thing, because I do a lot of hardwood, you notice I have a little Velcro around the end. I have the Velcro that has the, I don't know what you call it. It isn't the fuzzy part, it's the other part. Well, if you don't squeeze that tight, if you don't use a death grip on this thing, there's a little air in between it and your finger doesn't get as hot. That's one reason for my thing. The other reason is in my box. This is the box that I made that I put my burner in. The top of the box I have Velcro. I can just put my tips right there and they're stored. Another little thing I just thought of.